Okay, and now we're going to start the official meeting with me. Hi, good morning. My name is Gavin Campbell. I am the executive director. Sorry, not the executive director. I am the director of research at the National Commission on Science and Technology. So what we're having today is a biodiversity seminar to teach you about why biodiversity is important, what it is first and foremost, and why we need to protect it and conserve different biological resources within our country and in our world. Just going to share screen. So I just want to confirm everyone is seeing my screen. If anyone in the chat could just say yes or no. Awesome, thank you. All right, so good morning, everyone. Gavin Campbell, the Director of Research at the National Commission on Science and Technology, and today we'll be having a biodiversity seminar to introduce the topic of biodiversity and its importance. And we have a really special and incredibly important guest presenter today, Damani Calder, who is an environmental officer at the National Environment and Planning Agency, or as everybody might know it, NEPA. So first, I just want to give a quick introduction of the National Commission on Science and Technology, the NCST. So the NCST is the umbrella organization which is responsible for advancing the national policy and strategy on science, technology, and innovation in Jamaica. We are also responsible for promoting sustainable development, and this will be through education and our partnerships, which this presentation is key. We're also responsible for increasing science capital, which is basically knowing about science. So we want to make sure that more people, the public, everyone who is involved knows more about science, and we focus on increasing the awareness of science, technology, and innovation, as well as creating an understanding of the importance of science. We also want to raise awareness of scientists and their work. So what exactly are the scientists doing and how is their work important? Just a quick format before we start. I just want to note that biodiversity is the variety of living organisms on the planet, and this incorporates plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, and us. We are part of biodiversity. We are in an incredibly impactful part, and we need to be aware of our role and our impact on not just our own ecosystems, but also the ones that are involving non-humans. So these organisms are found in water, on land, in the air, and underground. There's a vast variety of physical habitats for all a variety of organisms to live in. And they are found in the past, the present, and the future. So there are things that we had in the past that affect our current climate and our current environments, things that we have in the future, in the present that affect everything around us, and our effects currently from the past and in the present will affect the different biodiversity of the future. So we play a very integral and important part in making sure that our future is enriched with the incredibly great biodiversity that we have currently and even expanded upon in the future. And this event is in commemoration of World Biodiversity Day, which hopes to highlight the importance of biodiversity across the world. And World Biodiversity Day will be May 22nd. But because that was a Sunday, and I'm sure no one would be here on a Sunday, we decided to have this event today. So greater biodiversity, the greater variety of plants, animals, fungi, and everything around us, every living thing around us, results in higher quality ecosystem services. So there's greater pollination, there's greater water purification, so that there are cleaner rivers and cleaner water for us to drink, as well as available for other organisms, plants, trees, everything that needs water, because everything needs water. So more biodiversity also results in more resilient ecosystems. So whenever there's a storm coming by and we have the mangroves protecting our shores, those prevent the shores from being eroded. So the more plants we have along that area, the better we are at withstanding the effects of climate change and even the effects of hurricanes. And it also results in more productive ecosystems. So we have more plants, more animals to produce more of our food that we do need to eat, to clean more of our water overall. One of the key entities for protecting biodiversity in Jamaica is the National Environment and Planning Agency, NEPA, which is mandated to protect the environment and all of its resources, as well as the aspects of the built environment, the human interactive environment. And today we have Damani Calder, an environmental officer from NEPA, to give us an incredibly valuable presentation on the importance of biodiversity in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, and across the world. So I hope that you will be incredibly engaged and you will be filled with questions at the end. Thank you so much for having us, and we hope that you enjoy. Damani, over to you. So I'll just stop share.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. Morning, everyone. Let me just share my screen. And thank you for the introduction. And I'm glad you brought up those points earlier. It makes my life a little easier. And I'm glad I had an idea of how to gear this presentation. So it does fall in line with your mandate as well. It's not a very technical presentation. It's more of an introduction to biodiversity, its importance, and selling piece, if you will, to get more people involved in appreciating, learning about, and preserving our biodiversity. So just to start with this cover slide, if anyone is familiar with those 3 species up front, they are perfect examples of Caribbean biodiversity and Caribbean uniqueness. So we have the Jamaican iguana, the Jamaican toady, and Browtonia nigrillensis, which is an orchid. Both the Jamaican iguana and the Jamaican toady, while being uniquely Jamaican, only found in Jamaica, their genus is also only found in the Caribbean. So there are other rock iguanas in Cyclura that are found on other islands, and just like Jamaica, some of them are found only on those islands. And in the case of our toady, Todus todus, which was first described in Jamaica, there are only 5, and they're only found in the Greater Antilles. So there's 1 Cuban, 2 Hispaniolan, 1 Puerto Rican, and 1 Jamaican. So this is showing how connected and unique the Caribbean is in terms of their species diversity. But as Gavin had mentioned, what is biodiversity? Variety of life, plants, animals, fungus, bacteria, viruses. Biodiversity could include things that are endemic, only found in one area, things that are indigenous, naturally found in an area that's of a wider geographical region, things that have been introduced from different geographical regions, and different habitats. So your mountain species, your dry forest species, your coastal species, things in the reef, things in the deep. Different habitats provide for different species, and you have a different variety of interaction. So even within the same habitat, for instance, a forest, separate from the middle of the tree, the bottom of the tree, underneath the tree. So you underground habitats, and then even within the own species, you have varied genetics, and you get variation among species. And there's a lot of interesting work that's being done looking at the richness of these variations and how it helps them to adapt. I mean, I could delve into multiple topics, but just to give you a quick highlight of one, the lizard on your screen is one of our 6 endemic animals. And there's research and evidence in other Caribbean islands, and some occurring here as well, about how adaptable these lizards are and the changes that they can quickly go through in short generations in adapting from forest to urban settings. and from hurricane ravaged areas. Quick things like increased size of toe pad, increased body mass, length of toes, helping them move around concrete spaces versus forest spaces. And that's just biodiversity in genetics. So, Caribbean biodiversity. The Caribbean is made up of many islands, right? And it's a hotspot, as you see there, for over 11,000 plants and numerous birds, numerous reptiles, especially reptiles, birds, amphibians. And there's a reason for this. Most of our islands are volcanic or have risen from the sea. So they weren't there before, they weren't connected to anything. Hence why we have these limestone outcrops and forests and mountains. If you go hiking, sometimes in the rock, you'll see shells. And those are from millions and millions of years ago, when that section of that hill was a reef. So when these islands emerge, there's nothing there. What gets there first? Things that can travel by wind or by sea. So you get your birds, your insects, your bats. These things bring seeds. The seeds grow. Things float across. Sometimes you have rafts from the mainland. Rivers, hurricanes, various things break off pieces of vegetation, and an animal is hunched on and hunkered down onto this, and eventually it reaches somewhere else, and that's how it gets introduced. And then over millions of years, you get something different and unique to that island because of the habitat that is there and how best that animal has adapted to being in that habitat. And that is why, even in the Antilles, like I mentioned with the toady, we share toadies uniquely developed on each of these islands, but they all made it across from an ancestor from mainland. In the Jamaican context, compared to a mainland area of comparable size, somewhere on either North American or South American continent, our biota is, and I wanted to teach everyone this word because I learned it recently. It's depauperate, which means poorly developed. So if you go to South or Central or North America, you see a wide range of animals. You have certain types of cats, you have certain types of rodents, certain types of dogs, you have a great variety of birds. There are all these different animals. You go away, you see squirrels and you see foxes and all. Jamaica has less of that because of the dispersal, as I mentioned before, where you have only certain animals that could possibly make the journey on a piece of the tree or could have flown across, would have made it to the islands. But those that made it to the islands occupied all these different niches. They're split up, as I mentioned, So one lizard, in the case of the tree lizard, would have come to Jamaica, or a group of lizards, I should say, not one, in the case of the tree lizard's ancestry. And then its children and its children and its children's children would have found different ways to exploit or utilize areas in the top of the tree, areas on the ground, areas in the middle of the tree. And they all then, based on those adaptations, split and became their own species. And if you take that principle and apply it to land crabs, which Jamaica has 10 endemic species, you apply that to plants, you apply that to birds, you apply that to frogs, and that's how you get this radiation. And that's not just Jamaica, but for Jamaica, compared to our larger neighbors, we are particularly rich in biodiversity, meaning we have a lot of speciation. And this is, I mentioned it before, due to our varied habitats. So Jamaica has Jamaica is one of those places you can go from the sea to almost a desert type habitat, and in an hour, go up into the Blue Mountains where you're in a montane forest. So in a small space, we have all these different habitats. So if you look at this map from Forestry Department, you can see all these different habitats around here. And that has helped Jamaica with this vast amount of speciation and biodiversity. You can get wet limestone forest, dry coastal scrub. We have lost some of our habitat. I often wonder what Columbus or what the Taínos would have seen when they just came to Jamaica before, you know, the deforestation and before agriculture, because there are areas where we have all of these plains where we've developed and built our towns and cities and our sugarcane and farms. What were those areas like before? What type of forests existed there? It's quite possible that we lost a lot of things that we did not know about because no one would have been recording these things at the time. They come, you want to live and survive. You're not looking at what's there, you're not cataloging what's there, poor understanding of science at the time. So all these various pockets are, you know, where we have our main repositories of biodiversity, these unique areas of differences of habitat. So just showing a little bit of our biodiversity. So I think that's a frangipani there. We have the Jamaican fruit-eating bat, which is not only found in Jamaica, but was first described here, hence the name. But Jamaica does have a fruit-eating bat that is only found in Jamaica. Looks similar, a little smaller. Our national bird, one of our 4 hummingbird species. That's a cave peripatus beside it. Velvet worms, very interesting group. Not worms, not arthropods. That one is a cave species. All the peripatus in Jamaica are only found here, and that one is only found in certain caves. And again, caves are another habitat of rich speciation and biodiversity. And Jamaica has a lot of caves because of our limestone formations. A cage fungus, a lot of people have been seeing those popping up recently since the rains. Jamaican giant swallowtail, one of our 8 known, I think it's 8 known species of dwarf gecko. That one, I particularly like this one. He has Jamaica colors on his head. We call them polylizards. Another Jamaican orchid, hammerhead shark, and one of our Jamaican snails. So anything outside, anything inside for that matter, it's alive, it's a part of our biodiversity. Some quick definitions: endemic, indigenous, and introduced. I mentioned the indigenous and endemic earlier in the presentation. And introduced, I also mentioned that. And some, in terms of introduction, some are deliberate, some are accidental. Accidental as in human accidental, where they have stowed away on ships or planes, and other accidental where they have flown across or drifted across. Some of our endemic species, another one, Jamaican blue kite swallowtail, one of our Amazon parrots. Jamaica has the unique distinction, along with Dominica, being the only Caribbean islands, only 2 Caribbean islands to have 2 endemic species of parrots. Our Jamaican boa, our largest snake. Jamaica has no venomous snakes. And that's one of our flagship species. And here's a galliwas, a blue-tail galliwas. And again, we have a number of galliwas species. As a matter of fact, recently, 2 were split, or, you know, the description had changed. So now we used to have 8, and I think now we're up to 9. A poorly studied group of lizards, often very feared and persecuted. They're harmless. This is one of the more stunning ones that was thought to be extinct. And again, this one was found in a unique biosphere, the Hellshire Hills, which is the region's largest contiguous dry forest. Indigenous species, an American crocodile. Often when we speak about American crocodile, persons say, but we thought it was Jamaican. Yes, it is. But it is found in the Americas. And there's reason to believe that different subpopulations, again, have different genetics. That's more research to be done there. It's an iconic species. It's on our coat of arms, even though it's not endemic. Our sea turtles, the manatee, white-crowned pigeon, all important in our culture, all important in our natural heritage. White-crowned pigeons do a lot of seed dispersal. This is a tropical buckeye, another butterfly that's found regionally, but are not all naturally occurring in Jamaica. You have the introduced species, some that are invasive, and the difference with an introduced and invasive species, an invasive species creates problems. So if it has a negative effect, it's an invasive. If it doesn't seem to have one, or there's no proven negative effect, it's introduced, and sometimes those species become naturalized, where they become a part of the natural landscape without tilting the scale in a bad way, for or against our natives. So the cane toad, it was brought in the 1800s. We call it the bullfrog. It was brought here deliberately for pest control. It has since become, same thing with the mongoose, it came for rats, but both have become major fixtures in our environment and a problem for conservation of many of our endemics, a problem that we exported at the time to other islands. Most persons should by now know about the lionfish. That one was accidental and spread throughout the Caribbean. And we've been tackling it by trying to eat it to beat it, educate persons about really trying to eat the lionfish and lay off the parrotfish to help with our reefs. Deer, accidental. They were in an attraction, they got out. They're now creating havoc for farmers. There are no natural predators for the deer here to keep them in check. Our plants have not evolved with that type of herbivore in the forest. So the growth rates are different. Even in places where deer are naturally occurring, you need predators to sort of keep them in check and keep them moving to allow seedlings to grow. That's not a feature of our natural environment, so they can become a problem, especially since their majority of them are found within the Blue and Jonker Mountains area. Domestic things like pigeons, or that's the rock dove, but what we call pigeons, dogs, cats, out and about in the wild. A quick glance at how rich our biodiversity actually is. So you can see the species richness of our endemic plants. Bromeliads, those are like wild pine. Pineapple is a bromeliad as well. They grow on the trees. And I'm going to speak about the bromeliads again because they're an example of richness in biodiversity and habitat. Orchids, like the bromeliads, they're epiphytes. They grow on other plants and on rocks, ferns, cacti, palms, grasses. So you see our richness in terms of orchids and ferns is really high. And again, this is because they have been trying to occupy all these various niches. So if you ever do have the opportunity to hike in the Blue and Jonker Mountains, look out for orchids, look out for ferns, and you'll see it's like a new one, something different. Sorry about that, I got stuck. So it's really good to just have an eye out for all these different things. Species richness and endemism in animals. As you can see, rotifers, by the way, are these little almost microscopic They're not insects. Invertebrates that live in water. But if you look at it, you see the number of species versus the number of endemic species. For some groups, it's really high, like land snails. I think Jamaica has one of the highest number of endemic land snails. Most persons see a snail and just think it's a pest, but when you go out into the forest, or if you happen to live in a rural area and you notice how different all these little shells are and all these different snails are, they're quite beautiful. You look at the frogs, I mean, and amphibians there, of our naturally occurring species, all endemic. Land birds, very high number of endemism. The bat number actually is incorrect. It needs to be changed. And one of the pictures below is our critically endangered Jamaican flower bat. That's a bromeliad crab. And I'm going to mention, back to the bromeliad, importance of bromeliads. And that's our green tree frog, again, tied to the bromeliad. As you see this illustration of a bromeliad, bromeliads catch water in their leaf margins, and it provides a habitat for a number of different species. And in Jamaica, we have quite a few endemic species, from insects Gavin can tell you about. We have damselflies that live and breed only in bromeliads in the forest. We have frogs that have to breed in the bromeliads with their tadpoles. We have crabs that care for their young in the bromeliads, because crabs have a life cycle that requires their young in water. And even just this bromeliad within a forest is a whole separate habitat. But why conserve biodiversity? We're losing it globally at a rapid rate due to development, climate change, the rise of certain diseases, and each species has their own role to play in this web. Some of the roles we don't know, we don't understand, and that's very dangerous, because you could lose a piece and it caused the whole thing to collapse, and you're not studying it, you don't know where it all falls in. There's an interesting, to the third point there about medicine and food and manufactured goods. There's an interesting movie called Medicine Man, if you ever had the chance to watch it or look it up. It's an old movie with Sean Connery, and it actually speaks to this. A man searching for cancer in the rainforest, found a cure. It happened to be an ant in a bromeliad, but soon after he found the cure, the area was cleared by the lumber company. And that's an old movie. So this is a concern that has been happening, that has been on the forefront of scientists' minds for a very long time. But it's a good movie, you should look it up. But the potential for, if you want to be humanly selfish about it, exists within biodiversity. And if you lose it before even recognizing it, sets us back. Also, natural heritage and legacy for future generations. Imagine if elephants went extinct tomorrow. Some of us have never seen an elephant. It would be just videos and hearsay and books for your children or your children's children. I don't know how important that is to some persons, but for me, that would be a tragic thing to say, oh, I remember when Jamaica had parrots. That's a shame we don't have them anymore. We killed all the trees that they're breeding, and it's hearsay. Oh, science, one thing. Mentioned a while ago, overlapping some of the threats to biodiversity. So you have habitat loss, fragmentation. So fragmentation is literally when, you lose habitat in one place, you lose it in another place, and now you have what you call green islands. So you have an island of forest that's surrounded by either agriculture or urbanization, and the members of that population cannot get to the members of the separate populations because of this desert of forest or vegetation in between. And you get, you can't find the mates are over here, you can't get to them, you have inbreeding, you have just general die out, overexploitation of habitats. So, you go into an area and you cut down all the trees for lumber or charcoal. You don't plant any back. You don't cut the limbs only for the charcoal. You cut the entire tree. We need to be able to use resources in a sustainable way. You go and you catch your lobster or your conch, and you catch everything. You catch them while they're breeding. You catch them while they have eggs. You catch them while they're juvenile. You catch the very large ones that would be laying a lot of eggs. You're indiscriminate in your practices, and eventually you lose them. As I mentioned, pollution and climate change. Climate change affects a lot. So a lot of the reptiles, turtles, and in some instances, there's evidence to show that crocodiles as well, their eggs are, the sex, the gender is determined by the temperature. If it's too high or too low, you might get all males or all females. And that is bad for population genetics. Imagine if in one generation of humans, everybody was just having boys. It's chaotic, and it's the basis of war. And sorry. So what do we do? Well, you have in situ and ex situ conservation. In situ is basically preserving habitats. The best thing you could do for biodiversity is to protect the habitats. And you find that in most instances, if you allow these habitats to exist without the pressures, it sort of heals themselves, it takes care of it. In some instances, in the case of the Jamaican iguana, where the mongoose is present, if you saw on the previous slide, that's a mongoose carrying after raiding a nest, iguana nest, you have to intervene because while the habitat is there are things like invasive species that have been introduced that are affecting it. So you need to have programs like Head Start programs. In that case, the lower photo, that's iguana that's going to be released. It has a pit tag. We have Head Start programs, you keep the young ones till they reach a certain size. You can release them into the wild. We have coral nurseries. A lot of the fish sanctuaries and some other NGOs are involved in helping with reef restoration. We have turtle monitoring groups. They're involved in turtle tagging. That's a regional effort as well, because we want to know where the turtles are going throughout our region, what countries they're being born in, where they're foraging. So in terms of Jamaican turtles, they're not just Jamaican turtles, they're the Caribbean turtles. And in some instances, they're not just the Caribbean turtles, they're the Atlantic turtles. And we all share them and have to do this type of research to understand the relationships between our regions and our shared species. Cave protection, I mentioned earlier, the fragility of caves and the rich biodiversity involved in them. So, again, exploitation and use of resources and how we use these resources and how we visit these habitats, be it the forest, not littering, not cutting down, not burning. Similar thing with the caves. What to do when you go in a cave, what not to carry with you, how to behave in these environments that you're not harming the residents. And education, things like this seminar, publications. I'll get more into that soon. Sorry. That's some of what we do at NEPA and some of what the other entities do. But what you can do as well is reduce, reuse your plastics, don't litter, don't burn. Burning is a really big thing in Jamaica for some reason. We burn leaves. There's no need to burn leaves. You just compost it. Composting leaves helps the soil. It helps with the biodiversity in the soil. It actually, if you're growing crops, it helps with the crops. Don't leave your plastic. I don't think I need to get into the solid waste and plastic thing deep in this discussion, but it's very, very bad. You can join groups, bird watching groups. You can join the Natural History Society. You can visit the Institute of Jamaica, the Natural History Museum. You can change certain habits like eating parrotfish. That's a whole nother topic. Not eating parrotfish, but not eating or not encouraging persons to catch crab or lobster during the closed season or when they have eggs or when they're mating or migrating, respecting closed seasons. Planting trees, encouraging biodiversity. So on the back of the planting trees, the far left picture is a real photo. That's actually Singapore. That's the gardens at the bay. Even though they're a dense city with all these skyscrapers, they try and ensure that they have green corridors. So in your communities, or you can demand this of your MP, if there's things being built, you can demand that they have green corridors, areas, spaces on the road that have trees. An open space does not need to just be grass. You can have an area that's mixed. So it's different types of grasses, different what people like to call weeds. All these little weeds are part of the biodiversity. All these variation in plants, different animals feed and live on different plants. So a perfectly manicured lawn is not encouraging the different species of bees, the different butterflies, the different bugs, the different beetles. You need variety to encourage variety. You can look up ways to create green spaces even in the most concretized of places. The best thing to do actually is when developing or redeveloping or changing somewhere, to ensure that you have green corners, green spaces, spaces for trees, not all the same type of tree. And in doing so, not just, I have a sign there that says don't spray organic farm and being eco-friendly pest management, but it's not just for the farmers, it's for us. So if you're spraying your garden or you're spraying your crops with pesticide, you're not just killing one species, you're killing everything that's there. You're killing the good, the bad, the indifferent, the pests, the pesky. And persons often say, oh, I used to see butterflies when I was young. I don't see much anymore. I wish when I was younger, I used to appreciate seeing the butterflies. And then they go outside and they use the worst chemicals on their plants, killing the caterpillars that turn into butterflies, killing the bees that would be coming to pollinate their flowers, killing the butterflies. So if you can be as organic as possible, there are various resources online to look at how to address pest issues without damaging everybody. Other thing is to get your hands on some books. Here are some examples. If you just go online or if you go into various bookstores, you can call around and find many publications on our rich biodiversity. You can contact IOJ, I think has the Endemic Trees of Jamaica book. BirdLife Jamaica has some books. Birds of Jamaica book. I'm not sure, but you can look online for the Bats of Jamaica. Birds Caribbean has provided this Heritage Plants Guide, which falls in line with what I just mentioned about planting things that encourage biodiversity. That one is tailored to birds, but there are other things that are tailored to insects. But again, it's just variety and trying to encourage a lot of our native species. Plants, once you plant it, the rest will come. That's a BirdLife Jamaica poster, a recent poster that was published last year. You can contact BirdLife Jamaica for that. You can gift that to children, put that in different schools, help build the appreciation. Butterfly books, a lot of these are available online, or you just go and look for them. as Gavin mentioned in the beginning, getting more persons involved in research and citizen science is one of the key components. So you can download iNaturalist, you can download Seek, the Merlin app, and eBird. All of these are free, and all of them allow you to help catalog wildlife. So I treat both of them, I don't know for the person's familiar, like Pokemon. You got to catch them all. You see something, you take a photo of it. Most people have smartphones now. Even if you don't have a smartphone, there's a web-based version of these things. Merlin helps you identify animals, iNaturalist and Seek also. But what it also does is help share that information with other persons that can help ID it for you. So you have iNaturalist on your phone, or you have Seek, you see an insect, you see a flower, you see a lizard, you see a snail, you take a photo of it. It's very intuitive, very easy. You can then upload where you saw it, any other interesting things about when and how you saw it. And it helps build this catalog. Many species have been discovered, new species have been discovered because the experts aren't always where the animal is, but you have persons that may come across it. So someone may see something strange or strange to them, take a photo of it, share it, and someone doing their PhD in another country is gone on iNaturalist, they're interested in Jamaican flora and fauna, they look and they say, oh my, that's something unique. They reach out to that person, that site, and before you know it, they are a part of a new discovery. Another one there is not an app per se, is Fishes of the Greater Caribbean, another free thing. It's more like a catalog. It allows you to ID fish within the Caribbean. So even if you just, again, very intuitive, you can type in the shape, you can select the sort of color pattern of this thing you saw, and it narrows it down. Very good app. The other thing is, as I mentioned, joining different societies and following different entities, putting up some there. I couldn't fit all. In terms of the various fish sanctuaries, if you just search Jamaican fish sanctuaries online, the White River Fish Sanctuary is up there, but there are many others. There's Aracabessa Fish Sanctuary, Discovery Bay Fish Sanctuary. But just look out and seek out these different groups. You can always reach out to them and share information, always ask for information, always ask for resources. They're all willing to help. We're all on the same mission. And get involved. The Natural History Society, BirdLife Jamaica, they have outings. We have different WhatsApp groups, different social media where we share information. We go out and we learn from each other. NEPA is always putting out information. The Forestry Department, IOJ, JET. But follow, share, get involved, download the various apps, and just practice. And I'm not sure if I ran over my time, but I think that's it. And thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Damani. That was a lot of information and it was very well presented. There are so many different things that were shown that I hadn't even fully known. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for taking the time out to give that presentation. Oh,
You're
sorry, my camera
welcome.
was off a while ago. Yes, if there are any questions for Damani right now, please feel free to drop that in the chat or in the Q&A section. There is still one more session to go through. So if you can, while you're typing your questions, just gonna move into that so we can save some time and then just answer all the questions at the end, okay? All right. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, can see screen. Awesome. So just gonna quickly run through some of the Jamaican invertebrates that we found. So as the man mentioned, there is a host of different species that we can find in Jamaica, and they're not just found in the forest, they're found pretty much anywhere there is a living organism. If there's a plant somewhere, there'll be different plants, and once you plant those plants, as he mentioned, different things will come. So I'm gonna show and highlight some of the different things that do come, but some of the ones that are on this smaller scale. So we can always see pretty easily the birds, the bats and everything, but these ones are a little bit more cryptic, but still important aspects of biodiversity. So they are going to be a collection of Jamaican invertebrates overall. So the first we have is a seed shrimp, which is a type of shrimp that is found in temperate water bodies. So they have eggs that are activated in water, but as soon as the water dries out, they die out, but their eggs can remain until water comes back again. So they're kind of immortal to some extent, but they're really, really resilient against drought overall. This is a centipede's leg. I'm pretty sure most people wouldn't have thought that a centipede's leg looked so beautiful and colorful. It has these very, very yellow sections, of bright yellow at the top, then pale yellow here, and in between they have some blue sections as well. So it is interesting to see the different variation in not just organisms, but even their features. So I hope that some people now can look at centipedes and be, yes, terrified because they're poisonous or they're venomous, but also appreciative because they're so beautiful to some extent. This is a crab spider named for its shape. So it is shaped like a crab and they're found in flowers. So they hunt in the flowers. Whenever any flies or anything that comes to pollinate the flower is present, they will feed on those ones and target them specifically. This is a mayfly. This is an aquatic insect and it uses these structures on its abdomen, these gills, for respiration. So it breathes on the water through these gills. And they're pretty quick. They move around very, very quickly in the water. This is a plant hopper. They use their incredibly long and strong legs to be able to jump several times their own body length. And they are pretty ubiquitous. They're found pretty much in every environment that you can think of. And they actually are model examples of what people can do by studying different organisms. So by studying how they can pack so much power in their jump, we can create different mechanisms and even robots that can be able to do that same thing, can have that much jumping power by studying how they jump really well. There are also aquatic insects that live not in water or not even in terrestrial environments, but just on the surface of water. So this one is the water strider and it lives just on the surface of the water. Anything terrestrial that falls into the water that is just struggling on the surface, it will run around on the water and find it. It can sense vibrations on the surface of the water to be able to find each other and also things that fall in and then feed on those things that fall in. And these ones are also a model example of what you can do by detecting vibrations on just really small surfaces. So there's a lot of inspiration that can be derived from the biodiversity of Jamaica and of the world, and so much innovation that can be created from their own understanding. This is a leaf hopper, similar to the plant hopper. This one has a really great jump and also has a really beautiful and colorful pattern. A lot of the times when I show people this picture, they aren't believing that this is something that's found in Jamaica in their own backyards. So you have to actually collect them and show them that yes, this is here. But the reason that they say that it's not there is because they haven't been aware of it. These things are incredibly small. They're smaller than your fingernail. So to be able to just see them is going to be difficult. But one of our key important responsibilities is highlighting the biodiversity of small organisms and small ecosystems, as well as the large ones. So in addition to the large ones, we also have ants. Many people always think they're like maybe one or two or three types of ants, but Jamaica has over 50 different species of ants. And this one in particular is called an acrobat ant because it is very acrobatically raising its abdomen above its head, which I am assuming most of us can't do. And when they do that, whenever there's a predator around, they put some venom on the tips of their abdomen from their stinger, and that they wave this abdomen around to kind of put some molecules in the air to let the predator know that these are venomous creatures that they shouldn't get in the air. So that's one way they can protect themselves from being eaten. This is a twig ant, and as the name suggests, it's found on twigs, particularly in trees. If you have been under a tree and something has fallen on you and stung you, it was most likely this twig ant, and they're incredibly fun. They're incredibly painful as well too, but they're also something that always impress me because they have such a variety of niches. So these twig ants live on twigs, and there are other ants that live in the on the ground, in the soil, and there's such variety of these ants in general. This is a small carpenter bee, and wild bees, not just honeybees, are incredibly important and efficient pollinators of several plants. So you have honeybees that will make honey for our purposes, but there are several different plants that these individual species of bees would be specialized to feed on and to pollinate. So they, or not feed on, but to pollinate. They have their mechanisms of attaching, of connecting to different plants and pollinating it in the most efficient way that even honeybees and other insects would not be able to do. So the greater biodiversity we have, the more specific species for specifically pollinating these specific plants the most, the better, because it increases efficiency of not just the crops, but also general other plants. And then those plants can facilitate hosting other species and more biodiversity as well. This is a parasitoid wasp, and like many, all parasitoid wasps, these lay their eggs in other insects, and then in doing that, the insect that they lay their egg in, their prey, is paralyzed, and then the young develop inside that paralyzed prey, eating it from the inside out. So they can be quite gruesome in their mode of operation, but they can be really, really important predators to pests. So if there's a caterpillar on your particular farm that you want to get rid of, if there's a wasp that specifically preys on that caterpillar, you can use that caterpillar to use that wasp to eradicate that caterpillar and keep it within a manageable amount so your crops aren't at a disadvantage. We also have beetles that live in water. So this one, a very, very tiny beetle, again, smaller than the length of a fingernail, is an aquatic one that lives in ponds and lakes in Jamaica. This is a flower beetle, the cousin of a beetle that you'd find in your counter flower or your cooking flower. And there's a reason why you can always find them in your flower, because they're an integral part of our ecosystem. So they're going to be in different things. So when wheat is being harvested to make flour, they're going to be their eggs in there, and those will help to provide some protein for us, but also help to pollinate the plants while they're doing that or before they do that. There are also leaf beetles. This one is quite pretty, looks like jewelry, and different structures that these insects create can be used in other mechanisms to create similar structures for other purposes. So you could, in the future, make jewelry inspired by beetles by understanding how they themselves make their own structures like these. There are also mosquitoes. And I know that many people wouldn't really care much about mosquitoes. They're not big fans of mosquitoes, but while they're aquatic, they help to filter feed from the water and help clean up some of the organic matter in water. So they help as a part of water purification or cleaning ecosystems to make more clean water available for us and all of us. And this structure right here is called a siphon. This is the pupal stage. And in this pupal stage, it doesn't eat. And the siphon, even though they are aquatic at this stage, they breathe air. And this is how they breathe air. So they breathe air through the siphon. And whenever they're at the surface of the water, they're trying to get some air to be able to survive, which is why when the individuals tell you to put oil on the surface of the water, that blocks them from getting oxygen from the air, because the siphon is also going to be stuck in oil and can't penetrate the surface of the water and the oil to get to air. So it will just suffocate and die. And last, we have a fly. This, I'm sure not many people would think would be so colorful. It has a little bronze up here and a little green down here and a little red eye up here. So it's a pretty colorful fly. This is a fruit fly, not a fruit fly, but a fruit fly. And they're commonly found in grasses because their larvae feed on grasses. So I showed all of these to be able to let you understand what we have, what are the other aspects of biodiversity that we don't normally see typically around every day. We don't see on our walks home, but are still there and are still important. There are several risks to biodiversity, as Damani mentioned earlier, some of which are pollution, habitat loss, and climate change. So climate change is a really, really big factor currently that affects several species, including ones that I've shown you, as well as ourselves. So we have to ensure that the resources that we are maintaining, that we are getting from the environment, are in a way that does not hamper the existence of current species and also of future species. So the risks of biodiversity results, or the risks to biodiversity result in a loss of the different species and the ecosystem services, the biodiversity that is produced by having these species around. So there'd be fewer pollinators, there'd be fewer water cleaning organisms overall, which means definitely bad things for us. There'd be fewer plants for us to eat. There'd be less clean water for us to drink, and that could lead to diseases and so on. And it also leads to the increased susceptibility of to natural disasters such as flooding and drought. So when we have floods, there are organisms that, or ecosystems that can support organisms to help to manage those kinds of events, as well as with droughts. So there are some plants that are very drought tolerant. They'll be able to resist for several months when there is no rain, and then can spring back as soon as rain starts falling. But if we don't have those, when rain starts falling, there won't be any new plants to spring back up. And then whenever rain happens again, that flooding will cause not just flooding of the entire area, but a removal of our soil. So those new plants that can survive that drought period are able to spring back up and keep the soil in place whenever the new rains do start again. So protecting our biodiversity requires primarily greater conservation and protection of species and habitats. As the man mentioned, there are several physical locations like the sanctuaries and the protected areas in Jamaica that are important for individual species and entire ecosystems. So there needs to be a greater push for those species and those areas to be protected and ensure the ecosystem services that we as Jamaicans and every other living organism in the world need for our survival. And this is the end, this is the last slide. Just want to thank everyone for taking part, for being here, for engaging, for your support. This is not where it ends. World Biodiversity Day is this coming Sunday, but biodiversity is continuous. There is no one day it is most important. This is just the day that we're highlighting this for you. Every single day, there needs to be protection and awareness of biodiversity, and it's important to us and other organisms in the past, the present, and the future. If you have any questions, I'd invite you to ask them now, whether that is regarding Damani's presentation or regarding my presentation, preferably Damani's presentation because mine was just pretty pictures to help you appreciate. Yes, so I want you, I want you to be able to ask any questions. And I know that we're a little bit over time, but if you have any questions otherwise and you want to send an email, you can send it to gacampbell-mset@mset.gov.jm, and I'll direct those questions to Damani, or if it's to myself, then yes. Like if there are any things that you want to address right now, please feel free. I know that some people have different timelines and they need to get to their next meetings. So thank you so much for being a part, and we are excited to work with you in getting some different ventures off the ground. So the NCST and NEPA are incredibly happy and excited to work with the general public to get more protection of biodiversity. So we hope in the future that you'd be able to join us and participate in some of our events and help to protect our natural ecosystems. Thank you. If there are any questions, please feel free. If anyone has to go, I understand. Please feel free to send me a message afterwards. And yeah, thanks for coming. All right, so I'm seeing that there are no questions from the first session or from the chat. But there are questions. Oh, so the iguanas, the Jamaican iguanas, I think this would be more appropriate for Damani. I could answer it just a bit, but he would have the most wealth of information.
Oh, so you want to respond to that?
No, you'd have more, so I'd give you the
Oh,
go ahead.
okay. So the Jamaican iguana used to be found in larger sections along the south coast. That's from the historical records. Actually, Ligani means iguana in I think Taino,
Hmm.
right? So but because of urbanization, exploitation, people used to eat the Jamaican iguana. Um, Jamaicans used to eat the Jamaican iguana, and the introduction of the mongoose, cats, dogs, that type of thing. And I think it was in the late 40s, the last iguana to be seen or collected in the wild was on Goat Island. Hence, a lot of the hullabaloo when they wanted to develop Goat Island and us in the environmental sphere trying to protect it, because we want to also, and that's an ongoing work with UDC and NEPA to repopulate the Goat Islands with the iguana. But in 1990, a hunter, um, Edwin Duffus, he was hunting wild pig, which is another introduced species, which is a problem for the iguana as well. In the Hellshire Hills, his dog came back with this lizard, and he went to the Hope Zoo, and it was a big shock because this would have been about 50 years it was thought to be extinct. Now, when we mentioned Hellshire Hills to persons, they immediately think of where beach and fishes and then the hills right behind them. But I encourage persons to just go on their map, their Google Maps or whatever map app online or whatever, and just look at Jamaica and zoom in, and you'll see right in the middle of this big green area, the word Hellshire. And if you go to the right, lower side, then you see that little chunk that's being carved out where Hellshire, as we know it with the residents and the beach and everything, exists. The Hellshire Hills itself is a quite large area. There are no visible paths in and out of it. It's very, I call it angry, very angry limestone, dry forest. And those are where the iguanas actually are. And it's interesting because they have to burrow in the soil to nest. So there are these pockets throughout that area of soil that they all sort of jostle over and fight to nest in. And then everything else is really just sharp, what they call iron rock or iron shore, very sharp karst limestone. And that is where they're found. And that is where, when you hear us in the media every year talking about how many iguanas were released in Hellshire, people freak out and think that they're running around Hellshire like the crocodiles are, but that's a different story, because the road is cut in the wetland. It's way up in the hills. It's sort of, it's really, really off the beaten path. Very beautiful, different habitat, but that's where they are.
Awesome. Yeah, and the iguana is important for seed dispersal. So the plants that they eat, when it poops out, it can spread those around different places and grow forests. So it's not just that giant lizard come to scare you. It's an important forest creator.
Yes, especially for some of the species of plants that are in those forests. Other animals may not be eating the fruit and spreading the seeds in the manner that the iguana would. Some of those things the birds aren't necessarily coming to feed on, and then other things that are eating them, like insects aren't necessarily the best seed dispersers. They're big pollinators. Well, you know that they're big pollinators, but they're eating the seed. So they're not spreading it. But everything, again, the biodiversity, everything has its part to play.
So. Yeah. So we have different individuals who are happy to hear that the iguanas will be staying in the hills far from people.
Well, ideally in the future, we'll have so many iguanas that,
We can just move the people. We'll move the people.
We have so many iguanas that, people have the bird feeder outside. They put out the water for the iguana. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. That is, I'm guessing, something that we would be excited to hear, not everyone else, but hopefully
the aim is to get more people.
Yes, getting people on board. Yes. So with seminars like this, then we're hoping that will be a future. We can have our pet backyard iguanas. If there are any more questions, go ahead, but I'm not seeing any right now. So Damani. I just want to thank you so much for taking your time out. I know that you're either in the field or at work in an office. So thank you so much for taking the time out to be able to present on these interesting and very important aspects of biodiversity. And thank you for sharing all the information that you have with us. If
Thank you.
there's Yes, if there's anything we can do to help out, you know where to contact us. And
Definitely.
we look forward to working with you in the future. To
Yes.
everyone else who has attended, thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for the extra time as well. And I hope that you have an incredibly awesome day and an incredibly prosperous and supportive future. I hope you can find some birds to feed, find some insects to give some food, find some plants to give a hug. Okay. Thank you so much and have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everyone.